Montagnards moved across borders to escape the wrath of the victorious North Vietnamese army and were in transit to Cambodia, where they joined up with their exiled leaders of the Montagnard nationalist movement called Phul Ro. Many of the Phul Ro Montagnards, like Kok So, had previously joined the Cambodian army in the fight against the Khmer Rouge.
How did you get out? Were you there when Saigon collapsed?
No, I was here. That's why I'm saying.
Okay, you got out before.
Fort Eustis, Virginia. We were sent by Lon Nol and for training there.
I suspect that most of those people we trained, they murdered.
Oh sure, yeah. Our people too. Our leader and our people, over 100 of them, they went to a French embassy over there, and they just give back to Khmer Rouge, and they're executed.
Following the refusal of the French embassy in Phnom Penh to offer sanctuary to the Phul Ro leadership in exile, the Khmer Rouge had them arrested. The Phul Ro leaders, their president Ibrahim Anul, over 150 supporters and their families, were herded into a soccer stadium where they vanished into the killing fields of Cambodia. Huge numbers of people sought a way out before Cambodia descended into hell. Kok So's wife and children were among them.
The enemy was shelling the airport, and then they just circled around until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They landed, and they offload. The first airplane landed, and they offload the medical supply for the World Vision Hospital over there. And then after that, they loaded all the orphanage children on the plane, and then they closed the door and took off because they couldn't stay on the ground that long because of the rocket is coming in from the enemies. And the second airplane, which Dr. Monaghan was on, landed the same thing, and they offloaded medical supply and loaded all the orphanage children and looking for my families, but they were not there. They're waiting for their visa. The passport still be in town, so they couldn't wait for them. And then they got on the plane and closed the door and start the engine. The first engine of the plane would crank when they started, but the second one just wouldn't crank. They kept starting, wouldn't crank. So they got out of the plane again and tried to look at the engine, what's wrong with it. And by that time, there is a man in a jeep came over. He said, "This is the passport. This is the passport." So they took my families over to the airplane, and my Dr. Monaghan said, "Are you Kasar's family?" She said, "Yes." And they put them on a plane, and Dr. Monaghan were carrying my youngest son on his lap, and they closed the door and started the engine crank, and took off from Phnom Penh and went to Bangkok. So that is the miracles. We over here in America, all of the Christian Happening Foundation and also the church where I went to, we were praying for them, and that's what had happened over there.
Left behind, America's allies would pay a terrible price for their loyalty.
When North Vietnam invaded the South, they arrest me and take me to jail 4 years.
ក៏ងាត់អាហារមីធុនឆាបោដួតប៉ាន់ទូណាំប្លុសជប៉ាន់យួនក្លែនម៉ាក់ក្រឹកក៏ធុនឆាបោដួតប៉ាន់ទូក៏យុះប្លុសណាំឡំប៉ាធុន
Because I served with the U.S. Army, the Vietnamese arrested me in 1976 and put me in jail for 3 years.
1975, the North Vietnamese communists beat me and put me in prison for 8 years.
The Vietnamese government put me in prison 10 years. They tortured me and knocked all my teeth out.
The Vietnamese communists killed 3 of my brothers in
1975.
Thousands of Montagnards would die in communist re-education camps. With the departure of the last US military advisors, the Montagnards were left without any significant material or armed support. The Montagnard soldiers carried on fighting the war under the belief that America would come to their aid. Battles raged throughout the 1980s and into the early 1990s as Vietnamese troops hunted the Montagnard resistance.
After 1975, we keep fighting for our freedom. We left Vietnam in 1981, crossed Cambodian, Mekong River, and we arrived in Thailand 1983. The Vietnamese troops attacked us December 4, 1984, at the Dong Rek Mountain in Thailand.
By 1984, I was wounded in my head with the M79.
The Vietnamese shoot me 3 times.
In 1975, the communist regime had also begun the process of systematic persecution of the Montagnards. They began by confiscating their ancestral lands and destroying their villages. The balance of power was shifting, and the original inhabitants of the highlands, the Montagnards, would find themselves outnumbered.
Right after the war, they resettled somewhere around 2 million North Vietnamese into the highlands down in South Vietnam.
From 1976 to 1979, the Vietnamese government forced me to work on the collective farm as slave labor.
They moved our village to the rubber trees and they took our land to build their houses.
In 1995, the Vietnamese government relocated 6 villages around 35 hamlets.
1995, 96, 97, the Vietnamese moved many Montagnard villages.
The communist government has taken all the land away from the Montagnards, and they have allocated them only small plots on which they can grow just a subsistence living, sometimes not even that. If there is a crop, any type of a crop failure or anything like this that happens, they don't have their relatives or their community to rely upon to help each other out anymore. They're just dead right out of luck.
With no voice or representation, they cannot stop the army logging companies from clearing their land.
They cut down all of the forests and the trees, and when they cut down all of the forests and the trees, we don't have any wood or anything to build our houses with. And they live in houses with holes in the roofs and things like that, and they have never lived like that before. And of course, we don't have electricity like they do, and then so when we cook, we have to use the wood to cook.
You know, the old people can speak Vietnamese.
And the Vietnamese have cut down almost all of the trees now in the central highlands, and they're continuing on, and even in cooperation with the Cambodian army over near the Cambodian border, they're going in and cutting down all the trees in Cambodia. They're making profits off of it, but the main reason is to deny the Montagnards a way of life.